joined today by Mr. Raymond Cassar, one of the Detroit area's premier criminal defense attorneys. Mr. Cassar, thanks for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Mr. Cassar, white-collar crime is frequently the subject of newspaper articles and primetime television shows. But are there many attorneys out there who actually understand the complexities of what really goes into a white-collar crime case?
There really aren't. White-collar crime generally involves a federal prosecution, and the federal prosecution generally entails a very complicated fact pattern. So there's not a great deal of attorneys that focus on white-collar crime because of the difficulties with it and because of the complexities.
So it sounds like you're one of a small number of lawyers who's actually an expert on white-collar crime law. I was wondering if you could briefly tell our viewers what type of activities a business person or government official can be criminally prosecuted for.
With white-collar crime, we're basically looking at the idea of fraud. Fraud in either a mortgage application or a business loan, or defrauding your employer or embezzling funds. But it's usually on a greater scale. When it is a state prosecution for white-collar crime, it's usually a smaller amount of money, but generally when the federal government gets involved and they prosecute white-collar criminals, they're looking for vast amounts of money. Huge loans, where we're talking either several hundred thousands of dollars or millions of dollars, or situations where it involved fraud in the mortgage industry involving several houses, a real estate franchise that has been defrauded, or a real estate agency that has defrauded the people that come to them and are seeking loans.
So, given how complex financial laws and government regulations are, it seems like it would be easy for someone to accidentally make a purchase or transfer that they didn't understand was illegal. Are innocent people ever wrongly prosecuted for something they unintentionally or unknowingly did?
I'm sure that there are people that are prosecuted that are technically innocent, but what we really are looking for, what the federal government is doing when they are prosecuting individuals, they're looking for what we call scienter, and scienter is that intent to defraud. So if you're filling out an application for a home loan and it says, how much are you making this year? And you know that you're only making $40,000, but you put down you're making $85,000. You're thinking that, well, I'm not really doing anything wrong, I'm just bumping up how much I make. That's clearly fraud. You're doing it with the intent that you want to encourage them to give you a loan. And the problem comes later on when you default on the loan, they find out on the application you weren't making $45,000 and you're in a lot of trouble.
I understand that there are state laws and federal laws that can be used to prosecute someone for white-collar crimes and embezzlement. Can you discuss the difference between these different laws?
Certainly. With the state laws, again, we're talking about a much smaller amount of money. It might be a loan fraud case involving one house. With the federal government, usually it's several hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's multiple houses. It's a fraud against a corporation, a business. It's an embezzlement where it has been going on for a lengthy period of time. Again, the difference being is it's a much more complex and much more expensive amount of fraud that was going on.
If the detective or police officer has already confiscated evidence, such as computers or corporate documents, should the person being accused just make it easy and admit they did and plead guilty?
I think the worst thing that a person can do when he's confronted by a police officer, we all know that we get scared. I mean, we're raised to respect police officers, but we're also very afraid when they come to us and they want to question us. You know, our instinct is to want to cooperate with them and tell them what's going on. It's probably the worst thing that you can do. Understand that most law enforcement agents are not going to be nasty to you. They're not going to be mean. They're not going to threaten you. They're going to be nice. They're going to say, hey, tell us what's going on. We figured you just made a mistake. The worst thing you can do, though, is to give them a statement prior to talking to an attorney. The best thing you can do is to say, you know what, this sounds very serious. Perhaps I should consult with an attorney first.
So you're saying a person should always enter a plea of not guilty and not make any further statements until they have a lawyer. What about asking for a court-appointed lawyer?
A person should always enter a plea of not guilty at the beginning. With respect to a court-appointed attorney, if the individual cannot afford to hire a retained attorney or private attorney that does this type of work, then obviously they should turn to a court-appointed attorney. The downside to that is that the court-appointed attorneys only have a limited amount of time that they're going to be able to spend on that case. So therefore, they're not going to be experienced. They're not going to have the ability to get into the heart of the case and really, really defend. You know, the bottom line is, if you can afford to hire a retained attorney, your family can help, that's the best way to go. It's your life on the line.
So it sounds like the consequences of committing a white-collar crime can be very serious. Can you discuss some of the penalties associated with embezzlement and other white-collar crimes?
A typical white-collar crime or fraud case would involve a penalty of up to 30 years in prison. And generally that penalty is generated by the amount of loss. So as the loss goes higher and higher, and they will keep digging to find more and more of a loss, the penalty also goes much higher. So again, it's in direct correlation to the amount of loss to the government, to the business, all the people that were associated in this fraud. The amount of loss is aggregated, and that's basically what drives that penalty.
If a person has been contacted by the police or a detective, or if he or she believes they're under investigation for a crime, what should they do?
The best thing that anyone can do is to call an attorney. Talk to an attorney before you make a statement to the police. If you feel the need to really want to cooperate with the police, still talk to an attorney first, because he can be there, he can be present with you, so that your statement to the law enforcement agencies is not misinterpreted, it's not put down incorrectly, and hopefully that it will not be used against you.
It sounds like the safest option for someone being charged with embezzlement or other white-collar crime is to immediately discuss their situation with a criminal defense attorney who's experienced in these matters, like you. Is there anything that we've missed that you'd like to say to our viewers who would like more information about white-collar crimes?
We're always happy to talk to anyone that's being investigated for a white-collar crime or a crime involving the federal government. Look, this is my firm. This is what we've done for almost 30 years. We love what we do. We love what we do, and it's an advantage that we have when we walk into the courtroom, because we do enjoy this. We use a team approach. We have several attorneys, and all of the attorneys in the firm do one thing, and that's criminal work. So that gives the client the benefit of multiple minds that are working to solve their problem.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining us today, Mr. Cassar.
Thank you.